DMX stood up for Eminem when the industry said, "He doesn't belong." What happened next changed hip-hop forever. Los Angeles, California, February 14, 2000. The Roxy Theatre. The room was packed with industry people. Record executives in expensive suits, A&R representatives with clipboards and attitudes, radio programmers who decided what America heard, music journalists with pens ready to write the narrative they'd already decided on before walking through the door. This wasn't a concert. This was a tribunal, a judgment, public execution disguised as a showcase. And Marshall Mathers. Eminem stood on that stage knowing exactly what this was. He was 27 years old. His album The Slim Shady LP had gone triple platinum 6 months ago, which should have meant he'd arrived, that he'd made it, that he was legitimate. But hip-hop didn't work that way. Commercial success didn't equal acceptance, especially not when you looked like him. Especially not when your skin was the wrong color for a culture that had spent decades being stolen from, appropriated and whitewashed by people who looked exactly like Marshall Mathers from Detroit, Michigan. The Roxy Showcase wasn't really about music. It was about the question that had been following Eminem since the moment Dr. Dre signed him. Does he belong here? Is he real? Or is he just another white boy playing dress-up in black culture, taking what he wants and giving nothing back? Marshall had performed 4 songs. Technical perfection, every word clear, every beat hit, every breath controlled. The kind of performance that would have gotten a standing ovation if he'd been anyone else. But the room was cold, arms crossed, faces skeptic. A few people nodded along, mostly the younger ones, the ones who'd actually bought the album, who understood what he was doing. But the power players, the gatekeepers, the people who decided careers, they sat there like judges waiting to deliver a guilty verdict. When he finished, the applause was polite, obligatory, the sound of people clapping because silence would be too obvious, too cruel, but just barely. Marshall stood there under the lights, breathing hard, sweat dripping down his face, and felt exactly the way he'd felt his entire life, like he didn't belong anywhere. Too poor for the white suburbs, too white for hip-hop. Too angry for polite society, too damaged for anywhere that required you to pretend you were okay. He walked off stage. His manager Paul Rosenberg was waiting in the wings, looking worried. Dr. Dre was in the back of the room somewhere, probably already fielding questions about why he'd bet his credibility on a white rapper. And Marshall just wanted to disappear, wanted to go back to Detroit, back to his daughter Haley, back to the trailer park if that's what it took. Because this standing on stages while rooms full of black industry executives decided whether to grant him permission to exist in a culture he'd loved his entire life. This was killing him slowly. The after party was in a VIP section on the 2nd floor. Marshall wanted to get on a plane and fly home. But Paul said he had to. Said there were people he needed to meet, hands he needed to shake, faces he needed to show respect to even if they didn't respect him back. So he went upstairs, walked into a room full of people who looked at him like he was a tourist, an intruder, a problem that needed to be solved. He grabbed a drink from the bar. Just water. He didn't trust himself with alcohol when he felt like this, and stood in a corner trying to be invisible, trying not to hear the conversations happening around him. But sound carried in rooms like this, especially when people wanted you to hear. I don't care how many records he sells. That was Russell Simmons, co-founder of Def Jam. One of the most powerful men in hip. He was talking to a group of executives, not bothering to lower his voice. Hip-hop is a black art form. It came from black struggle. It's ours. And we don't need white boys profiting off our pain. But Dre signed him, someone else said. Dre co-signed him. That has to count for some. Dre made a business decision, Russell said. I respect Dre, but that doesn't make this kid legitimate. He's skilled. I'll give him that. But skill isn't enough. You can't wrap your way into a culture that isn't yours. You can't buy your way in. You can't even talent your way in. Some doors aren't meant for everybody. Marshall felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not anger, he was used to anger. Had been angry his whole life. This was something worse. This was resignation. The feeling of knowing that no matter what he did, no matter how good he got, no matter how many albums he sold or how many times he proved himself, there would always be rooms like this, always be people who looked at his face and decided he didn't belong. He was about to leave. Fuck the networking. Fuck the industry politics. Fuck all of it. When he heard a voice cut through the room like a knife through silk. The fuck you just say? Everyone turned. The the music seemed to get quieter even though the DJ hadn't touched anything. DMX stood in the doorway, Earl Simmons, 6 feet tall, all muscle and intensity, wearing a black hoodie with the Rough Riders logo, a bandana around his head, his face set in an expression that made grown men step back without meaning to. He'd performed earlier that night at the House of Blues. Different venue, different showcase. But everyone knew who he was. Everyone knew what he represented. He was the biggest rapper in the world right now. His album And Then There Was X was dominating the charts. He was hood royalty, street certified, everything the industry respected and feared in equal measure. And he was staring at Russell Simmons like he was deciding whether to walk over there or charge. I said hip-hop is a black art form, Russell repeated. He wasn't backing down. Russell Simmons didn't back down from anyone. But there was a cautiousness in his voice, an awareness that the temperature in the room had just changed. And I don't think we need to hand it over to who? DMX took a step into the room. Everyone moved out of his way without being asked. Finish that sentence. To who? To people who don't understand where it comes from, who don't live the life, who don't. You talking about Eminem? It wasn't a question. DMX's eyes found Marshall in the corner, held his gaze for a second, then looked back at Russell. You're standing here talking about whether a white boy belongs in hip-hop. That's what this. I'm talking about cultural integrity, Russell said. You're talking about skin color. DMX's voice was flat, hard. The voice he used on records when he was about to say something that couldn't be unsaid. You're doing exactly what white people did to us for 400 years. You're judging someone by their face instead of their heart, and you're calling it integrity. The room was completely silent now. Everyone watching, this wasn't just an argument. This was history happening in real time. DMX, the realest, most street, most certified rapper in the game, was publicly challenging Russell Simmons over defending a white rapper. The kind of moment that would be talked about for years. Earl, I respect you, Russell said carefully, but you don't understand what I'm saying. Hip-hop came from. I know where it came from. DMX took another step forward. He was in the middle of the room now. Everyone had formed a circle around him, and Russell without meaning to, like the room itself was organizing around this confrontation. It came from the Bronx, from poverty, from people who had nothing but their words, from people who were invisible to everyone else but found a way to make themselves heard. You know what that sounds like to me? He turned, looked directly at Marshall in the corner, pointed at him. That sounds like him. That sounds exactly like him. Marshall's throat was tight. He couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. DMX looked back at Russell. You know Eminem's story? You know where he came from? Let me tell you, since you're standing here judging him without knowing He grew up in Detroit, 8 Mile. Poor as fuck, white boy in a black neighborhood, got beat up for being white, got beat up by white people for acting black, didn't belong anywhere, raised by a single mother who didn't want him, abusive stepfather, moved around so much he went to different schools every year, bullied everywhere he went, found hip-hop the same way we all did, because it was the only place that told the truth about pain. DMX's voice was getting louder, more intense. Marshall had never heard anyone defend him like this, had never heard anyone put into words what he'd felt his whole life, but couldn't explain. He worked at a factory to support his daughter. DMX continued, struggled, battled, got booed off stages because of his skin, kept coming back, kept grinding, kept being real even when being real meant people like you would judge him for shit he couldn't control. And now he's here, made it, got signed by Dre, sold millions of records, and you're still standing here saying he doesn't belong, saying he's not legitimate. Based on what? His face. It's not about his face, Russell said. It's about exactly his face. DMX pointed at his own face. You see this, you see my skin. That don't make me more real than him. That don't make my pain more valid than his pain. Pain is pain. Struggle is struggle. And hip-hop, real hip-hop, has always been about giving voice to people who don't have one. Doesn't matter what color that voice is. Hip-hop is about black identity, Russell insisted. It's about black resistance. It's about truth. DMX's voice cracked slightly. It's about being real. And Eminem is the realest motherfucker I've heard in years. You listen to his lyrics, really listen. That's not some white boy playing dress up. That's someone who's lived through hell and found a way to turn it into art. Same as me, same as Pac, same as Biggie, same as every rapper who ever meant anything. He looked around the room, made eye contact with people. Y'all wanna talk about cultural appropriation? Let's talk about it. There's white boys who put on a costume, who fake an accent, who pretend to be something they're not, so they can profit off our culture. That's real, that's a problem. But that ain't him. He pointed at Marshall again. That's a kid who grew up in the culture, who was shaped by it, who respects it, who's adding to it instead of taking from it. And if you can't see the difference, then you're as blind as the people who told me I'd never make it out of Yonkers, who told me a street dog with a crack addiction could never be a rapper, who judged me before I ever opened my mouth. Russell was quiet now, thinking. The room waited. You want to protect hip-hop, DMX said. Protect it from people who dilute it, who make it safe, who turn it into a product instead of art. But don't protect it from real ones. Don't protect it from people who love it enough to pour their soul into it. Because that's not protection, that's gatekeeping. And gatekeeping killed jazz, killed rock and roll, will kill hip-hop too if we let it. He walked over to where Marshall was standing in the corner, put his hand on Marshall's shoulder. This is my brother. I don't care what he looks like. I care about what's in his heart. I care about what he's been through. I care about whether his art is real. And his art is real. It's raw. It's honest. It's everything hip-hop is supposed to be. And if you got a problem with him, you got a problem with me. The silence in the room was deafening. DMX and Marshall stood there together. Black man and white man, street-certified legend and controversial newcomer, standing together while a room full of powerful people decided what this meant. Russell Simmons looked at them for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a mean smile, a thoughtful one. You know what, Earl? You're right. Everyone in the room seemed to exhale at once. I was wrong, Russell continued. He walked over to Marshall, extended his hand. I judged you before I listened, before I understood. That's on me. I apologize. Marshall shook his hand, couldn't find words, still processing what had just happened. But I'm not the only one who thinks like I did, Russell said. There's a lot of people in this industry who are going to question you, judge you, make you prove yourself over and over. You ready for that? Been doing it my whole life, Marshall said. His first words since DMX had started talking. His voice was rough. I don't need everyone to accept me. I just need to be real. Let the music speak. The music does speak, DMX said. Loud as hell, and anyone who can't hear it is deaf. Russell nodded slowly, looked at DMX. You're willing to stake your credibility on him, publicly, because that's what this is. The two of you standing here together like this, that's a statement. I know what it is, DMX said. And yeah, I'm willing, because he's real, and real recognizes real. Even if it cost you, Russell asked. There's going to be people in the community who see you defending a white rapper, and question your blackness, question your loyalty. You ready for that? DMX's jaw tightened. Let them question. I've been questioned my whole life. By white people who said I was too dangerous, by black people who said I wasn't conscious enough, by Christians who said I was too worldly, by street niggas who said I was too spiritual. Everybody always got something to say, but I know who I am. I know what's and I know brotherhood when I see it. He looked at Marshall. This kid right here, he's been through war, different war than mine, but war just the same, and warriors recognize each other. Don't matter what uniform they're wearing. The party continued after that. The tension conversations started again, but everything had changed. DMX and Eminem stood together for the rest of the night, talking, laughing sometimes, building a friendship that would last until DMX died 21 years later. But before the party ended, before people started leaving, Russell Simmons gathered everyone's attention, stood on a chair, made an announcement. I learned something tonight, he said. I learned that protecting our culture doesn't mean building walls. It means knowing the difference between exploitation, between appropriation, and appreciation. And I was wrong about Eminem. I judged him without knowing him. Let my own biases cloud my judgment. That's on me. He looked at Marshall. You've got a place, but with that place comes responsibility. You're going to be held to a higher standard, because of your skin color. That's not fair, but it's reality. Every time you speak, every time you make a record, you're representing hip-hop to people who might not otherwise give it a chance. That's a burden, but it's also an opportunity. Use it right. Marshall nodded. I will, I promise. And Earl, Russell continued, looking at DMX, thank you for checking me, for being willing to put your credibility on the line for what's right instead of what's comfortable. That's real leadership. That's what hip-hop needs. DMX just nodded. Didn't need the recognition, didn't need the praise. He'd done what he did because it was right, period. Later that night, after the party ended, DMX and Eminem sat in DMX's car in the parking lot. Neither of them wanted to leave yet. They'd exchanged phone numbers, made plans to record together, but right now, they just needed to sit with what had happened. "Why'd you do that?" Marshall asked finally. "Why'd you put yourself on the line like that?" DMX was quiet for a moment, staring out the windshield at nothing. "You remind me of me," he said. "Different details, same story. Kid who didn't fit anywhere, who found hip-hop and found home, who poured all his pain into music, because there wasn't anywhere else to put it. I see myself in you. And if somebody had stood up for me when I was coming up, really stood up, put their credibility on the line, it would have meant everything. It means everything now," Marshall said. His voice cracked slightly. I don't have words for what you just did. You don't need words. Just be real. Keep making real music. Keep telling the truth. And when you get to a position where you can help someone who's going through what we went through, you help them. That's how we honor the culture. Not by gatekeeping, by lifting people up." They sat in silence for a while. Two men who'd survived things that should have killed them, who'd turned pain into art, who'd found each other in a world that tried to keep them apart. "Can I ask you something?" Marshall said. "Yeah, that shit," Russell said, "about people questioning your blackness, because you defended me. Does that worry you?" DMX laughed. No humor in it, just acknowledgement of reality. "People have been questioning my blackness, my whole life. Not black enough, not street enough, not conscious enough, not whatever enough. You know what I learned? You can't live your life trying to prove yourself to people who already decided who you are before you opened your mouth. You just live your truth, and let the rest shake out. But your fans, my real fans, will understand. The ones who really listen to my music, who know my heart, they'll get it. The ones who just want me to be what they think I should be, they were never really fans anyway." Marshall nodded slowly, processing. "You're going to go through this a lot," DMX said. "People questioning your legitimacy, your right to be here, your motivations. And some of that questioning is valid. You do need to be conscious of the culture you're participating in, the history you're part of, but some of it is just people being unable to see past your face, and you can't let that stop you. You can't let that make you doubt yourself." "How do you not doubt yourself?" Marshall asked. "How do you keep going when everyone's judging you? You know what you've been through. You know your own pain. You know your own truth. Nobody can take that from you. Nobody can invalidate. And when you're making music, when you're creating, you're not doing it for the critics, or the gatekeepers, or the people who think they own hip-hop. You're doing it for the kids like us, the ones who don't fit anywhere, who need to hear that someone else survived what they're going through." He looked at Marshall directly. "You're going to help a lot of white kids, who think hip-hop isn't for them, who think they have to hide the fact that they love this music. You're going to show them they can be themselves, and be part of this culture. That's important, that matters. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for that. But I don't want to take." "You're not taking anything, you're adding. There's a difference. Taking is when you profit off something, without respecting where it came from. Adding is when you contribute something real, something valuable, something that makes the culture richer. You're adding. I can hear it in your music, so stop apologizing for existing. Stop apologizing for loving hip-hop. Just be great, be real, and protect the culture by keeping it real, not by keeping people out." The next day, DMX called every major radio station and music publication, did interviews, made it clear Eminem was legitimate, Eminem was real, and anyone who had a problem with Eminem had a problem with him. The industry response was mixed. Some people respected DMX for standing on principle, others accused him of selling out, of betraying black hip-hop, of being used by white executives who wanted to push a white rapper into a black art form. But DMX didn't waver, didn't apologize, didn't back down, and his defense of Eminem changed the conversation, made it harder for people to dismiss Marshall as just another white rapper trying to profit off black culture. Because if DMX, the realest, most street, most certified rapper in the game, said Eminem was legitimate, then maybe he. Over the next year, DMX and Eminem became close friends, talked regularly, supported each other's albums, planned collaborations that never quite happened, because their labels couldn't agree on terms, but the friendship was built on mutual respect and shared pain, and the understanding that being different, being an outsider, being judged for things you couldn't control, that was something that transcended skin color. In 2002, when Eminem won the Oscar for Lose Yourself, He thanked Dr. Dre in his speech. But backstage, when the cameras weren't rolling, he found a payphone and called DMX. "I won," Marshall said, voice shaking with emotion. "I fucking won." "Of course you did," DMX said. "I told you, real recognizes real, and you're as real as they come." "They're never going to be able to say I don't belong now," Marshall said. "An Oscar, a fucking Oscar for a rap song. I proved it. I proved I belong." "You already proved it, DMX. You proved it every time you stepped in a booth and told the truth. The Oscar is just confirmation of what we already knew, but I'm proud of you, man. You earned it. I couldn't have done it without you," Marshall said. "That night at the Roxy, when you stood up for me, when you told Russell Simmons and everyone else that I was real, that changed everything. You changed everything." "I just told the truth," DMX said, "and you did the rest." The host nodded, processing Eminem's words. "Do you think that moment, DMX defending you, changed how the industry viewed white rappers in hip-hop?" Marshall thought for a long moment. "It changed how I viewed myself. Before that night, I was constantly second-guessing, constantly wondering if I had the right to be here, if my success was legitimate, or just some fluke, some novelty act that would fade. Earl didn't just tell the industry I was real, he told me I was. And once you believe that about yourself, once you stop apologizing for existing, that changes everything." He leaned back in his chair, eyes distant, remembering, people don't understand what it's like to love something so deeply and be told you can't have, not because you're not good enough, but because of something you can't control, your face, your skin, where you were born. And hip-hop was everything to me. It was the only thing that made sense. The only place where people told the truth, about pain and struggle, and surviving, when the world wanted you dead. I needed it, and to be told I couldn't have it, couldn't be part of it, that was killing me. DMX gave you permission. He gave me more than permission. He gave me brotherhood. He showed me that the culture wasn't about bloodlines, or skin color, it was about truth. And he proved it, by putting his own reputation on the line. That's not something you forget. That's not something you can ever repay. The interview went viral. Clips spread across social media. Hip-hop forums debated it for weeks. Some people praised DMX's stance. Others still questioned whether a white rapper could ever truly belong. But the conversation had shifted, because Eminem wasn't just talking about acceptance anymore. He was talking about brotherhood, about someone who'd seen past the surface to the soul underneath. DMX saw the interview too. He was in his apartment in Mount Kisco, New York, struggling through another bout with sobriety, another battle with the demons that had chased him his whole life. He watched Marshall talk about that night at the Roxy, and felt something tighten in his chest. He picked up his phone, called Marshall's number. It went to voicemail. "Yo, it's Earl, just saw your interview on Sway. Man." His voice cracked slightly. "You ain't gotta keep thanking me for that. I did what anyone should have done, what was right, but I appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you keeping it real all these years, staying true to the culture, adding to it the way I knew you would. That's what matters, not what I said in 2000, what you did after, how you carried yourself, how you respected the game." He paused, searching for words. "Sometimes I wonder if I should have done more, said more, been louder about it, because the hate you got over the years, some of that was because people saw me defend you, and got even angrier, like I was betraying my own people. And I know that weighed on you. I know you felt guilty about it, but I want you to know, I never regretted it. Not once, not even when it cost me." Another pause, longer this time. "You changed hip-hop, Marshall, not by being white, by showing kids like you, kids who don't fit the mold, that they can love this music, be part of this culture, contribute to it. That matters, that's legacy, and I'm proud to have been part of your journey, man. Real proud." He sat there in the darkness of his apartment, thinking about brotherhood, and legacy, and what it meant to stand up for someone, when the world was watching. Marshall listened to the voicemail 3 times. Each time his throat got tighter. By the third listen he was crying. Not sad tears, grateful ones. The kind that come when you realize how much someone believed in you, even when you didn't believe in yourself. He tried calling back. No answer. DMX was probably in the studio, or on the road, or dealing with his own battles. The battles that never really ended, that just paused, sometimes before coming back stronger. So Marshall did what he always did when words failed him. He wrote. That night he started a verse, not for an album, not for release, just for himself, for Earl, a way of processing what that night in 2000 had meant. what DMX's friendship had meant, what it meant to be seen, truly seen, by someone who understood. The verse never made it to a record, but it existed, in a note, in a voice memo on Marshall's phone, words that captured the moment when a black man from Yonkers looked at a white man from Detroit and said, "You're my brother." Not because they looked alike, not because they came from the same place, but because they'd survived similar hell, because they'd both turned pain into poetry, because they both understood that art wasn't about fitting in, it was about telling the truth so powerfully that people had no choice but to listen. In 2020 during the pandemic, Marshall and Earl talked more than they had in years. Phone calls late at night when neither could sleep. Conversations about life and death, in legacy, and whether any of it mattered. "You ever think about that night at the Roxy?" Marshall asked during one call. "All the time," DMX said. "Not because it was some big moment, because it was simple. You were real, Russell was wrong. I said something, that's it, that's all it was supposed to be. But it became more than that. Because people made it more than that," DMX said. "People wanted it to be about race and culture, and all this heavy shit. And yeah, it was about those things. But at the core it was just about recognizing truth. You were real, I said so, that's it. You changed my life, you changed your own life. I just refused to let people erase you, before you had a chance to show what you could do. That's different." They talked for hours that night, about their kids, about their struggles with addiction and mental health, about surviving fame, and the weight of being icons, and whether legends ever got to rest. "I'm tired, Marshall," DMX said, near the end of the call. His voice was different, heavier, like something was weighing on him that he couldn't name. "I'm so fucking tired. I know, man. I know, but I'm glad I stood up for you, even with everything, all the backlash, all the people questioning me, all the shit that came from it. I'm glad, because you were worth it. You proved you were worth it. Earl, let me finish. You proved it by being great, by being real, by never selling out, never compromising, never letting them turn you into something safe. You stayed dangerous, stayed truthful, stayed you. That's what I saw in you that night, and I'm proud I was right." Marshall couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "Take care of yourself, brother," DMX said. "Keep making real music. Keep fighting for the kids who don't fit. That's the legacy, not the awards or the sales or any of that. The kids who hear your music and realize they're not alone, that's what matters. You too," Marshall managed. "Take care of yourself too." "I'm trying, man. That was their last real conversation. 4 months later, DMX was gone. When DMX died on April 9, 2021, Eminem wrote a tribute that he posted on social media. Part of it read, "Earl Simmons saved my career before it even started. When everyone else was questioning whether I belonged, he stood up and said I was real, but more than that. He taught me what real meant. Not by talking about it, by living it. By being willing to stand up for what was right even when it cost him. By choosing truth over comfort. By seeing people for who they really were instead of what they looked like. I owe Earl everything. Not just my career, my understanding of what hip-hop really is. My understanding of what brotherhood really means. My understanding that family isn't about blood or skin color or where you're from. It's about who stands with you when it matters. Who sees you when you're in verse. Who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. Earl fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the person he saw in me that night at the Roxy." Real recognizes real, and Earl was the realest to ever do it. The night of DMX's funeral at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, Eminem didn't speak publicly, didn't perform, just sat in the audience with tears streaming down his face while others paid tribute. But afterward, in a small room away from the cameras, he found Wah and D from Rough Riders, found DMX's family, and he told them the story of February 14, 2000, the night DMX stood up for him at the Roxy, the night Earl Simmons looked at a white rapper and said, "He's one of us." "He didn't just accept me," Eminem told them. "He fought for me, put himself on the line for me, and I never forgot it. Every time someone questioned whether I belonged, every time the industry tried to use my race against me or against the culture, I remembered what Earl did, how he stood up, how he refused to let people gatekeep based on skin color, how he chose truth over comfort. He believed in you," Wah said. "Believed you were real. He made me believe I was real," Eminem said. and that's the greatest gift anyone ever gave. The story of DMX defending Eminem at the Roxy became legend in hip-hop circles. Different versions emerged over the years. Some people said it was at a different venue. Some said different people were involved. Some denied it happened at all. But the people who were there remembered, and they told their version, and the core truth remained. DMX had stood up for Eminem when it mattered, had risked his own credibility to defend someone who looked nothing like him but shared his pain, his struggle, his commitment to truth. And in doing so, DMX had shown what hip-hop could be at its best. Not a culture defined by gatekeeping and exclusion, but a culture defined by recognizing truth wherever it is, by valuing authenticity over aesthetic, by understanding that pain and struggle and the need to be heard, those things transcended race, those things were human, those things were universal. Real recognized real. And on February 14, 2000, in a VIP room at the Roxy Theatre in Los Angeles, DMX had recognized something real in Eminem, had seen past the surface to the substance, had understood that hip-hop wasn't about protecting territory, it was about protecting truth. And that truth was simple. If you've lived it, if you've suffered it, if you've turned your pain into art that helps other people survive their pain, you belong, regardless of what you look like, regardless of where you came from, regardless of whether you fit the image people have in their heads of what a rapper should be. You belong. Because you're real, and real recognizes real, always has, always will. That's what DMX taught Marshall Mathers on a February night and that lesson shaped not just Eminem's career, but hip-hop's understanding of itself. Its understanding that culture isn't something you protect by building walls, it's something you protect by knowing the difference between exploitation and participation, between appropriation and appreciation, between people who want to take and people who want to add. DMX knew the difference, and he stood up for it when it mattered. That's brotherhood, that's leadership, that's what it means to be real, and that's why DMX's defense of Eminem in 2000 changed hip-hop forever.